All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dive Talks Live. I'm your host, Joe Bosques, and this is Divesoft TV. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around the world. I know we've been gone for a little while. We've been, at least here in Tampa, we've done a cross country trip, and we did some demos out on the West Coast. We had a great time, got to see some old friends, and got to meet some new friends. So, we are back to our live streams. And this week, my guest lives just down the street from us here in St. Petersburg, Florida, Mr. Michael Barnette. Michael is a very accomplished diver, karst underwater research diver, author, underwater filmmaker, and founder of the Association of Underwater Explorers. So let's see if we can pipe him in. Hey, hey, Michael.
Hey Joe, how's it going, buddy?
How you doing?
Excellent.
Good, good. Yeah, we're so happy to have you on. Michael works for NOAA, for the National Marine Fisheries Service, as a marine biologist, with duties working and protecting sea turtles and managing that fishing fleets have turtle exclusion devices. And he was also made a fellow of the Explorers Club in March of 2009. So you have a very, very impressive resume in diving. You know.
I've been fortunate, very fortunate.
Yeah, we're super happy that you joined us this week. So
I appreciate the invite. I'm happy to, as you know, I'm always happy to talk about shipwrecks and diving in general. So it's be great.
awesome. Yeah. So for our guests that are online, could you tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from?
Sure. I grew up in Virginia, just basically equidistance between Washington D.C. and Richmond, Virginia, in a city called Fredericksburg,
Mm.
and grew up there and went to university in South Carolina, University of South Carolina, Gamecocks, where I got my degree in marine science. I've been very fortunate as a kid. I always knew from the get go that I wanted to, you know, basically be a marine biologist.
Yeah.
Myself, like so many others, right, have grew up on Jacques Cousteau and all these documentaries, and I knew I wanted to do that. So it's kind of lent itself very easily to where I've gotten to now, working for NOAA.
Right, right. And it's no easy task, even to start school in marine science and marine biology, and then to actually stay in the field and to actually grow and do more. And so that's really neat. Did you were you able to kind of bounce around and then get into NOAA, or how did that lead off to?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had to, took some lab technician jobs doing field work right out of college after graduation, and worked my way up, getting some, background experience and trying to be as diverse as possible. Worked there for the Army National Guard there in Columbia, South Carolina for a while, doing terrestrial work, and then went to work for South Carolina Department of Natural Resources doing oyster reef research in
Mm,
Charleston,
yeah.
South Carolina, and then moved back north to Virginia to do inland fisheries for a while. And then I started working for Virginia Marine Resources Commission doing saltwater fisheries management and research. And then
Oh,
from
not
there, I
bad.
took a very unusual little segue. I started working for a group called American Oceans Campaign, and my boss was actor Ted Danson. We were an environmental organization trying to basically, I was actually on Capitol Hill as a lobbyist, suit and tie every
Wow.
day, taking the train into DC, and it was quite interesting. My second day on the job, I was in the White House doing a briefing, so it was weird. It was
Thrown
very
into the
weird.
fire.
Yeah, it was. It's one of those things they throw you in the deep end very quickly, and I knew within obviously the novelty was quite unique, and I was meeting senators and that kind of stuff was interesting, but that's just not my lifestyle. I did not want to be in a suit and tie every day doing that. And fortunately, I got an offer to work for NOAA a little while later, and after some consideration, I jumped on that offer and moved to Florida.
Mm. Wow, it's really cool. It sounds like you did a lot of work kind of in the field research, and then kind of fisheries management, and then policy. And so it's
Exactly.
a lot of feet in a lot of different ponds.
Yeah, it gives me the whole spectrum of all the issues and different perspectives. So it's lent itself very well to my current job now, just to see all those different perspectives and and
Right.
to know what all is involved in making the sausage, really, what it comes down to.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it, because I at least when I taught at the university, it was very much like people come in, they see Jacques Cousteau, and they're like, I want to be a marine biologist. That, or they see SeaWorld and they want to, work with marine mammals.
Yeah.
And so, but there's so many ways to do it. How did diving kind of play into this? Were you diving before college?
I always wanted to. I just
Hmm.
never really had the opportunity. And when I was at university, I basically enrolled into a diving class and got certified my sophomore year of college. So
Great.
and then just took off. Basically, anywhere and any time I could dive, I was doing it in the local lake there in Columbia, South Carolina, or local rivers going for fossils. So I really just jumped all in and
Yeah.
every opportunity I could to go diving.
Now, now with NOAA, so what exactly is your role right now in NOAA?
So basically, in a nutshell, I'm a bureaucrat. I
Hmm.
write regulatory, basically regulations and policy
That's
is
the
what I do. I
real
don't.
work.
I'm
Yeah.
actually on the field that much doing, research. I do help out with some of my colleagues that do some really cool stuff in the field, and also with other individuals, friends of mine that work at different agencies doing sea turtle research work. So I try to, use the people I work with and branch out, and always am volunteering to help them out with their work just to get out of the office from day to day.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very much like it's very much a community and whatnot, and so seeing what people are up to, how people can help each other within it, and so that's really interesting. Now, and how did this lead into shipwrecks? I think I've been seeing that you've been kind of interested in shipwrecks for quite a while. How did that get started?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because you would think as a marine biologist I'd be out looking at pretty fishes and marine life, but my diving career has kind of gone the other direction, and because I've always had an affinity for history. That's one of
Hmm.
my other pursuits when I was in college. I took a lot of history courses and particularly maritime history. So
Yeah.
obviously that leads us right into shipwrecks, right? So
Yeah.
I started want to dive on shipwrecks and explore them, and then that the natural progression to actually trying to find new shipwrecks and trying to identify shipwrecks that people have maybe been diving on for decades but don't really know the story behind it. So I use diving as the tool to find those answers.
Right, right. And so do you how do you how did you find, like, how did you start working on kind of identifying the wrecks or these shipwrecks, and, like, how would you identify them?
Sure, there's a variety of approaches that you can
Right.
use. You have your toolbox and you have all the different tools you can to use to achieve your goals. But a lot of people think you just go out and go diving and try to find an artifact with the name on it, find the bell.
Hmm.
Obviously, that's the ideal way, right? The nice,
Yeah,
neat,
yeah,
easy
that'd
way
be
to
nice.
find
Right, it's there on a platter.
that's exactly find that smoking gun. But a lot of time you have to do a lot of work. It's better to spend 10 hours on land doing research for every hour you're on the water. I mean, it's much more productive. So
Right.
I do a lot of archival research, look at a lot of documentation and newspaper articles to get an idea of vessels that were lost in a given area. And
Right.
then when you dive into a shipwreck, once you basically get the basic diagnostic features, is it a sailing ship? Is it a steamship? Where is the
Hmm.
machinery? What kind of machinery did it have? Uh, Things like that. You want to find some obviously some diagnostic clues that you can use to winnow the list of suspect vessels down, and then ideally you want to find something that corroborates your theory of what it might be, and
Right, a
also
couple
maybe
things that kind
find
of relate to it. Hmm.
yeah, or actually a lot of times you're basically finding things that don't conflict with or contradict with your theory, because obviously you also
Mm.
want to find out knowing what it isn't is useful as well. You can
Right,
rule
right.
out potential suspects. So it's a process, and sometimes you can do it on the first dive, sometimes it's very easy, like you find a shipwreck and you find a car it has a specific cargo, and you
Hmm.
analyze that cargo, and then there's sometimes it could be a very unique cargo that leads you right to your identification. And other times it takes multiple dives over many years to find out what you're looking for and what the identity of the wreck is.
It really is some kind of investigative work, and so.
Yeah, I've always felt it's a combination of research, skill, and luck. A lot of
Yeah.
times when it comes down to it. So I'll take what I can get, though.
Now, do you find like for example, I know at least in kind of around the world when you have a lot of these shipwrecks that are a lot older, are oftentimes you have one wreck on top of another wreck, and is the hardest part is distinguishing, okay, this is one particular wreck. I mean, do you find that a lot, at least in the East Coast?
Not so much here in the U.S. Obviously, in other countries where you have centuries of maritime history, we're obviously a very young country in the scheme of
Hmm.
things globally.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think what you're getting at is sometimes these wrecks are not movie sets. They're not just a vessel and taxiing
Right,
to the
it doesn't
bottom.
look like a boat that's like has everything.
Yeah, you really have to have an eye for what you're looking for and what you're looking at. You have to, get to know vessel architecture, the way things would be placed and oriented on the wreck, even when it's
Right.
more like some assembly required, like it's a ship kit, and all
Hmm.
the parts are spread out over the bottom. It's like a puzzle. So you really need to. I've spent a lot of time, looking at basic books and things like that to figure out, about machinery and how vessels are built. Because a lot of times when you disassemble that vessel, you kind of put it back together in your mind what you're looking at. And a lot of times I don't look for, let's say 17th century or earlier, like treasure ships, right, which are
Hmm.
basically just a ballast pile. A lot of the wood's gone and things. I focus more on, basically 19th century, 18th century, and beyond, and more modern vessels. And so there's a little bit more to work with there.
So, and I always, at least my dad used to always ask me about finding gold and treasure and all those things. But I used to say that, like, you find more kind of identifying features in something like a vase or something that someone made, rather than like a piece of jewelry or a piece of gold and stuff, because gold, it can be melted and changed over time and whatnot. I mean, do you ever kind of look for things like that, or it's just more structural identifying features?
No, I've been fortunate. I don't chase after shiny, glittery objects. As far as
Right,
gold and
right,
silver, whether it's brass, it might be a different story. But to me, it's the history is the treasure. Knowing,
right.
actually trying to unlock what this vessel is and tell the story of what happened to it, and it's then learning its service history and all that. And sometimes you find a little personal artifact, and to know who held that and who owned it. Again, that's just, to me, it's fascinating. I mean, I'm just a very curious person, and like you said, gold and silver, it's just kind of cold, and obviously it's
Right.
it's got a value to it, a dollar value, but really it's one dimensional to me.
Right, right. I know. I believe it was David Concannon was saying that they found a leather bag with kind of notes and like a journal inside, and because it was inside the leather bag, it was protected, at least relatively. And so, I mean, I imagine a find like that would be pretty huge.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've been on some shipwrecks that were like, there's a wreck off Virginia Beach we dived when I started really getting into it, into wreck diving in the Mid Atlantic, and proper wreck diving. And this is a vessel that was headed, basically carrying everything you would expect to see in a general store back in the late 1800s.
Oh, wow.
And to basically, see the crates and then pop a crate open, it's mostly buried and you have to do some digging, but then to see through the straw, you can see the remains of the straw, the packing straw, whether it be bottles of liquor or axe handles, doorknobs. I mean, basically anything you would need as a frontiersman, basically developing the West, the Midwest.
Oh, that's
You
interesting. Yeah.
It was really cool to find all this stuff, and to know that story. Again, it's like a time capsule. I know
Yeah.
archaeologists loved that soundbite, and many times it is true. Other times, not so much.
I mean, that's fascinating. Are there? I know, like you have your YouTube channel, and you've talked about there's some databases that you can use online just to kind of see soundings and kind of different things. Do you can you talk a little bit about kind of the database and how to like kind of search for these things?
Sure. I guess we live in a great time, as far as for research and stuff, because when I got started in this 20, 25, 30 years ago, I mean, you had to go to libraries,
Yeah, a little bit's
do
changed.
microfilm. Yeah. And you had to do it the old school way. And when you wanted, let's say you wanted images or just to find out what museums had in their archives. You had to send, letters with stamps on it. I mean,
Yeah.
just it was a crazy world, man. You had to wait weeks, if not longer, to get your answer. So
Oh man.
now it's literally,
Yeah. Now
minutes
you have the
to get
world right
answers.
here.
Exactly. So that has been a huge leap forward as far as technology. I mean, we obviously talk about technology from from diving, whether it be rebreathers or dive computers, but as far as this is kind of a parallel to that, to see how it's
Hmm.
helping shipwreck diving by finding information that is easily accessible now online. A lot of newspapers are being digitized every day. They're adding more and more pages of historical newspapers. And that's a great source of information. You find
Yeah.
out vessel losses. Sometimes you get personal stories of survivors. So that's a great source. And obviously, the insurance records are being digitized as well. So
Oh
you get
wow. Yeah. I didn't even think insurance records. Yeah.
yeah. So you have insurance records. Sometimes there's investigations of shipwreck losses. You'll find some really useful information there. And then obviously, what you kind of hinted at earlier, bathymetry data, multi-beam sonar, side scan sonar. There's repositories of all this data. Sometimes it's being used for geological surveys or for navigational of ship channels,
Hmm.
but they find things on the bottom that maybe not is interest to them, but as a wreck diver, knowing where shipwrecks are and more importantly, where shipwrecks aren't. I mean, that's very useful if you
It's
have
probably
wreck
very
numbers and
helpful. Yeah.
you can go online and see just flat, barren bottom. It can save you a lot of time on the water of where not to look.
Yeah, that I mean, like you keep kind of going back to like you got to know what it isn't, and you have to know like okay, there's nothing here. You can kind of put it out of your mind that you're like, all right, there's not going to be anything there, and so that can kind of narrow your search for actually finding something in particular.
Yeah, it makes you a lot more efficient. Is what it comes
Yeah,
down
yeah,
to.
and then being more efficient makes it more sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so have you had some like kind of big surprises while you've been researching or even like diving on them? Have you had some pretty kind of you think things are going one way and then it actually just completely goes 180 degrees and goes the other way?
That's a great question. Yeah, there obviously been times I've been diving on wrecks where you have to kind of be a cynic and temper your enthusiasm, because a lot of times when you're diving wrecks that you don't know what's on the bottom, there's something there, some structure, and it could be a rock pile or a shipping container or just
Right.
junk, a fish trawler. And there was a time we dove a wreck that we identified as the Municipal a few years back. Some fishermen took us out to it. They said it has big wreck, and they were basically describing it as this massive, 40, 50 foot of relief, and it's just fish everywhere. And
Wow.
so I'm in my mind, I'm trying to think, there's a few big wrecks we're looking for in this general area. So I'm like, oh, okay, this could be interesting.
It's like, oh, it might, yeah, you get excited. Yeah.
Yeah, and this wreck is about 400 feet of water. It's about 150 miles offshore, so it's no small
Wow.
venture to get out there.
It's pretty
But they
remote.
were,
Yeah.
yeah, they were grateful, gracious enough to take us out there. And we get on site, and I'm looking at the bottom finder, and obviously I don't have a very good poker face because they're watching as I'm watching the bottom finder. They're watching my face, and
They're like, oh, he's going to be
not
so excited.
I was not impressed. Apparently, I was not impressed because, to me, at first impression, it looked like a barge. I mean, it was like 15 foot of relief, flat, and I'm like, we came all the way out here to dive a barge. And so, yeah, but we're there, so we're going to dive it. And we splashed in, went down, and it wasn't a barge. And I was
Oh,
quite shocked. And once I got down, you can see the mast laying over. And we had a theory of what it was initially. We thought it was a whaleback steamer called the City of Everett that was lost in the area. But it wasn't until the second dive that I got into the engine room and I found the manufacturing plaque on the engine. You can
hmm.
still see under the incrustation basically the engine number and the yard number who built it, and use that information. It's like a fingerprint. It's like a VIN number
Oh
for a
yeah.
car. And I tracked the information down to identify it as the Municipal. And basically, now I have to research what this vessel is. I'd never even heard of it. And quickly found out it was a relatively young freighter. It was built in 1916 and was lost in 1919. There was a hurricane, a massive hurricane. It hit the Florida Keys and went across the Gulf of Mexico and smashed into Texas.
Oh
And
wow.
it was one of the most deadly storms in Florida history for sure. We lost quite
Hmm.
a few ships. There was a liner with hundreds of people on it called the Valbonera that was lost in the Florida Keys. So this was just one of them that slipped through the cracks of history. And again, being able to identify it and tell its story, that was fantastic. But again, we did have a few, curveballs thrown at us and some rights and lefts. But ultimately, we found the goal. We reached the finish line and identified it as the Municipal.
Wow, that's really cool, especially like when you get there, you're just like, oh man, we did all this work, 100 and some miles, and then it's just like it's not going to be anything. And then when you splash, you're like, oh wait, there's something here. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think I got some video of it as well, and it's one of those wrecks. It's being that far offshore, it's quite spectacular. You're out there, usually 100 foot of visibility or more. And the day we went out there on the Discovery Dive, it was like a lake out there, which was we
Oh,
really lucked out and got there. And I remember I was decompressing at 150 feet of water and looking up and seeing the boat, and you can see people, bending over the bow of the boat, looking down at us. It was that crystal clear and that calm, and it was a hell of a dive. So that looks like the Sonora. That's a different wreck.
yeah. You sent us a couple of videos of some different shipwrecks.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we'll definitely try to get into there and pipe them in. I mean, it sounds like there's always so much adventure just to kind of researching and finding these wrecks. And I mean, are you still kind of finding a lot of new stuff nowadays? Like,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's getting a little tougher because we've obviously cherry picked the easy ones, the more obvious ones, but there are still wrecks. In fact, just today, yesterday and today we identified a wreck in multi-beam sonar that I've known about for years. We had a general location of where it was lost, but it just popped up in some new multi-beam. It's about 450 feet of water, so we are getting a little bit deeper. So the cost-benefit
yeah.
ratio to exploring these you have to have that internal discussion with yourself as well as with your dive buddies of whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze, because this is
Hmm.
obviously in the Gulf Stream as well. So you're dealing with
Oh,
having
wow.
sometimes to jump in a tenth of a mile or more up current from the wreck to hit it, because you got 3 to 4 knots of current to contend with. So, but yeah, there's still some out there. And we, as I mentioned just today, we were able to pinpoint the location, and now we can start planning if we want to actually dive it or not.
It's really exciting. It's almost like when people say there's no new caves,
Oh yeah.
new shipwrecks. It's like that's one of the things that I love about Florida is that you can stay here and you can really still find new things and so much. And I think this is a really cool video. I think you were going out with spear fishermen.
Yeah, and that's a group that I've kind of tapped into. I've got a lot of friends that are commercial fishermen, and these guys, this is their office. They're out there all the time,
Yeah.
and they typically know where the wrecks are, and they don't always know what the wrecks are. What's there? They just know it holds fish, and I always am like trying to needle them for information. Is it wooden? Is it steel? Is it big? Is it small? You
Hmm.
got to think very general terms. But that's been very useful to basically kind of narrow down targets of priority that I need to get on. And this is one of them that we got, again, as I mentioned, from some other fishermen. And we went out with some guys with a very fast boat to get out there. And because otherwise if you're going, 10, 11 knots, it's a whole day to get out there. But when you go on 30 knots, it makes it a much shorter day. And, a lot of times when I'm doing these trips with these guys, I'm just a stowaway. They're doing their business, and so I'm out there for 3 or 4 days with them to maybe do one dive. And I've been out there sometimes with them and not even gotten in the water. So that's the way you got to play the game. But
Right, right.
it's a way to get a free ride basically, and I'm out there trying to help them out diving as well, and working topside. But to have a chance to dive something like this is you can't pass that up.
Right, right. And were you able to identify this wreck? I wonder if we can minimize my screen so you can make it picture bigger.
Yeah, yeah. I think on this dive actually is when I identified it. Right now, and that's always as a someone that's tried to. I've been getting into videography and stuff. You want to shoot video to tell a story and get pretty pictures, but at the
Right.
same time, when you're doing exploration, you're also trying to maximize your time on the bottom to look for key features, and that internal struggle of focusing on one thing too long. You want to obviously put your head on a swivel and look for as many things as possible. I'm always trying to cope with that underwater, to be as calm, cool, and collected to get pretty pictures, but at the same time get that data that can help identify a shipwreck. And this this is a great example that I just decided to drop in through the engine room skylights. It's all open, and dropping into the engine room. So the deck of this is about 360 feet of water. So, about
Wow.
100 and it's about 105 meters or so.
Right,
And
right.
going inside the bottom's about 380, 390. And so I'm getting in, you're looking there at the boilers in front of me. And to get in, there's also a lot of lionfish around too, which you have to kind of obviously give them a little latitude so you don't get poked, because that would make for a very
Little
unpleasant day.
pricklies, poisonous
Yeah,
prickly bushes all around you.
exactly. And so I'm just kind of again trying to look at the machinery, how many boilers it has, what kind of engine. Is it a diesel engine? Is it a steam powered plant? And this is just serendipity, because I swim in and kind of navigate around, and I flip around to go back out, and I just happen to see straight lines on the engine, the face of the engine, which you'll see here in a second when I turn around. And I focused in on that. You can actually see the raised writing embossed. It's a big brass black, and that's what identified the ship as the Municipal, which was just. I saw it. I'm like all there by myself. My buddy was outside the wreck looking for some clues and some artifacts. But there you can see the engine room, the skylight where I dropped in, and I'm in the engine room there myself. And straight ahead, I can almost see it right here. I see just raised lines. It looks a little bit, again, you got to know what you're looking for. And just to see something like that, I'm like, I need to get a little closer and a little closer. And as I pulled up on it, that's when I realized what it was. And
in the documentation, like this video is so important because the amount of how many opportunities are you going to get to get there, and then how much time are you going to spend there? I mean, it's not at a shallow depth at all, and so you need to be very, very efficient at the time you're there. There you go, you had a great shot of it. And then you can look back to it, and then you can also use this for different stakeholders that are involved and whatnot. And so
yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the remoteness, the depth is one thing, but when you're talking about 150 miles one way,
right.
We've known about this for over 10 years, and I think we've done 2 or 3 dives on it, because again, it takes sometimes just to find a weather window and to find when a ride is available to go out there. There's no charter boats that are going to take you that far offshore without taking a second mortgage on your house. So you just got to bide your time, and that's for someone like me that's I frustrate easily and very impatient. It's a battle.
It sounds like you're pretty patient. You're like, we've known about it for 10 years, but I get impatient. It's like, oh, wow.
Well, it's like that. A lot of times we have information. We know something is there. We know what it is. But just waiting for the opportunity to dive that is you're twiddling your thumbs and you're watching the weather, the forecast, and hoping a ride comes available to get out there. But that's the game we play.
Well, that was a really awesome kind of illustration of it. And so in 96, you founded the Association of Underwater Explorers. Was that kind of, kind of formalize and organize yourself to kind of make this type of work easier, at least?
Absolutely not. So funny story about AUE is I started as a lark. I wanted to reach out, and this is the true story. I wanted to reach out to Clive Cussler, who's a very well-known author. There were when I was living in Virginia Beach, there were some Civil War shipwrecks in the James River off Newport News. There's a very well-known blockade or commerce raider called the CSS Florida. There's also USS Cumberland, which was a naval frigate that was sunk by the Virginia, which was the second ironclad after the Monitor in the Battle of Hampton Roads. And I had gone out there with a side scan sonar company back in 95, 96, and we got some spectacular imagery of these wrecks. And I knew that he'd done work on these wrecks back in the 80s. So I just wanted to reach out to him and share this information, this technology, right? They didn't have this opportunity, this kind of imagery, and I thought he'd find it really interesting. And so I felt to make myself more legitimate than some whacknut,
than some guy
diver, I made AUE, I made letterhead and everything, and sent him a letter through snail mail. Found his address. Actually, there's a way to find it in one of his books. He has it in a picture, and I used that. And then 2 weeks later, I came home from a dive, and he actually called and left a message on my answer machine.
That's funny.
And so we talked quite a bit about it. And then I decided to use that name. I applied for a research permit through state of Virginia to explore a couple other shipwrecks.
Mm-hmm.
Again, when you when you call yourself AUE versus,
Oh,
hey, I'm
it's
Barney,
formalized. Yeah,
it
exactly.
sounds like it's got this big group and we're well formed and established and organized. And it was just me at the time. And
Yeah.
so it's just been kind of a running joke, and it's been a very loose organization of friends that have similar pursuits and passions. And so nothing formal about it whatsoever. It's just kind of a funny story, and it's lived
It's
on
a
for
good
several
story.
decades.
I mean, it's yeah, exactly. It definitely kind of formalizes it, and you've also had a lot of articles and publications in different magazines, like Advanced Diver magazine and whatnot. And I was finding them, and it's just like it's awesome material, especially talking about like shipwrecks in the Keys and whatnot. And so it's really interesting, at least for diving and whatnot.
Yeah, and I've also enjoyed writing because again, part of this is once you identify something, unless you share the information, it really has no benefit to society, right? Others won't know the story and everything. That's a coming from the academic background and everything. That's a big issue, right? With people
Yeah.
doing research and their masters and PhDs, and unless you really know where to look for it, no one knows where that information
Hmm.
is, and it only enriches a very small group of people. So again, that's why I do the videos. That's why I try to have a Facebook page just to share that information with others. And thankfully there's quite a few other like-minded folks that do likewise. And again, just to share these stories and our passion, which is diving in general.
Right, right. And I know you have three books that you've written, and I think your first one is the Shipwrecks of the Sunshine State. Um, and a lot. It was fun when I like because I've seen the books before, and I was like, oh, that's Michael, and because like we met through mutual friends and whatnot, and it was
Yeah.
just like it was like, oh, it was really cool. And so I mean, those books are it's kind of like you've done a very good job of kind of cataloging so much of it.
Yeah, I have to thank my friends that I was diving with at the time to kind of push me into that because, especially my primary partner in crime, Joe Satelli, because he knew I was obviously doing all this research and I had file cabinets full of information. And this is pre-internet. This is like 2001, 2002,
Hmm.
where I could share this. And he said, "Why don't you publish a book?" So I was doing trip reports, and I already had information. I was kind of actually acquiring and accumulating it uh, for my personal database, and so it kind of just you know took on a life of its own.
Yeah, it seems like that kind of often happens. That's fast. It's really cool. So the and then in 2006, I think was it 2006 was your first expedition on the Britannic?
Yeah, so I've done 3 trips there thus far. So 2006 was my first venture there with a couple of friends shooting. They're doing a documentary for the History Channel, and that
Right.
really it was a tease, really, because we were there for it was a. I mean, there's a story all on its own there to tell about the expedition, but nonetheless, we got some dives on the wreck, which is just breathtaking, and the story behind it. Obviously, the relationship with Titanic. It's one
Hmm.
of those. It's one of those wrecks that's there's countless shipwrecks that we dive any given weekend that most individuals, most people, the general public could give a rat's ass about. Right? They just
Hmm. Yeah.
there's no connection to them, but there's a very select few, whether it be Titanic, the USS Monitor, or Lusitania. Those wrecks, those vessels, I mean, they resonate, and people that aren't even divers have probably heard of them. And so
Right.
I
Right.
love being able to dive those kind of wrecks that are just they surpass the diving community. They go well beyond that, and so when you're at a party or just talking to people you just meet, and they ask if you're a diver and what wrecks you've been on. I mean, I usually talk about those first because they've probably heard of them versus just some
Hmm.
generic freighter out in the Gulf of Mexico somewhere like the Municipal that few divers have even heard of. So, but yeah, the Britannic is just spectacular, and I've been fortunate enough to go back 2 other times in 2015 and 2016, and hopefully, knock on wood, and this whole COVID situation, kind of settles down a little bit. We're hoping to go again later this year. That's obviously I actually was talking about this with a friend this morning about it, about how what the prospects were.
Right.
So it's something I think any diver, anyone watching this right now can appreciate because it is definitely thrown us a curveball these past 2 years of what we normally do with international travel to go diving.
Yeah, and I can't imagine the logistics behind it are, an easy task.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's gotten a lot easier in more recent years, but 2006, it was an expedition in all senses of the word. I mean, you had to go there. We had to find all the bailout tanks. We had to, we had friends from the UK come down with compressors, generators, all the other gear that obviously you had to either bring in yourself because it wasn't locally available there.
Hmm.
And we trusted a few local vendors there that actually near Athens, a couple of dive shops that were providing cylinders for us. And we ultimately, when we actually saw them, found they were woefully inadequate. I mean, some of them actually had just you take the valve off and look inside, and just pour out dried up salt granules and
Yeah.
dunk. We had another one. The crown we started filling it up. It actually was leaking through the crown of the neck. It was aluminum 80.
Oh
So
no.
that was that we saw that we thought it was the O-ring, the neck O-ring, and
Uh-huh.
then we're like put water on it. You actually put your hand on the side of the crown of the tank, realizing there's air coming out of the metal.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
yeah, we basically stopped that and moved it away, and I mean it was basically a ticking time bomb. So yeah, that was interesting. So again, many stories from that trip.
And it's I think for some reason we're having some issues with the video playing, but it's just a little sneak peek, and you have the kind of video. Oh, looks like it's
There it
going
goes.
there.
You just had to push play.
Ah, that's the hard part. So you can see that you guys are diving on rebreathers, and I mean, how far offshore is it?
So it's actually very close, and some of this footage is from 2015 and 2016. This is actually 2015, but there's a couple wrecks. There's the Bertigala, which is like a couple miles outside the harbor, and Britannic is I think about 9 miles.
Hmm.
It's very close. It's I mean, not even 45 minutes to an hour to get out on site, leaving the harbor. So quite convenient as far as that goes. You don't have a brutal long boat ride to get out there.
Right. And it looks like there is a habitat, a chamber, and and now it seems like there's a lot of support now, like you said.
Yeah, well, this was 2015 and 2016 was a very unique experience. We're actually working out there with a group called uh, U-boat Navigator, which they have two
Hmm.
submersibles now. They have a chamber on board. They also have basically a in-water habitat. It's
Wow.
basically the Calypso. If you imagine Jacques Cousteau's Calypso, but even smaller,
Right.
more compact, and more lethal. It just had every tool you'd want. And so we had an excellent opportunity to dive with them and to document these wrecks. And it's kind of hard now. It's like the first time you fly first class and you don't want to go back to coach now, right? You have all these resources and you don't want to go back to just floating in the water by yourself and not be able to listen to music in the habitat. So,
Oh, yeah, you definitely get spoiled. Yeah, it's
oh,
like
we were
it's like
spoiled
wait, we
rotten.
don't have music. There's no. It's like I don't get in the dry habitat now.
Yeah, and you can talk to them, and we had hot water plumbed down to us to put our hands and under a hood. It was just nice to obviously when you're doing a 6 or 7 hour dive to stand up there, take the loop out of your mouth just to rest your jaw and to chat a little bit, and it kills some time as well because you're focused on just talking to your buddy and
Right.
share your observations from the dive. So it was a phenomenal experience.
Yeah. It's very unique, and it's like you said, it's a very special experience, and so I definitely recommend. I know you have the kind of the video series on your YouTube, and so like I definitely recommend everyone go watch it. It's a really interesting video.
Yeah, and that was again. I just can't say enough about the hospitality of the U-boat group, U-boat Navigator, and that is, I mean, there's technical diving, right? Like what we do with rebreathers and dive computers and stuff. But
Hmm.
this was ultra technical diving because to have submersibles and lighting rigs and
Yeah.
ROVs, and it was an experience I'd love to repeat it, but I think it was a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Now, like kind of how you were saying, the technology and everything has changed so much in just the 10 years from what was that, 2006 to 2016.
Yes.
And so it's I mean that's kind of a common theme with like there's just been a big jump, especially with the equipment that we're diving, the rebreathers, and now it's like now there's different rebreathers on the market. There's like decompression rebreathers, side mount rebreathers are much more available than they were then, and so it's just like the ball's going downfield. So
Yeah, no, the technology is still improving, and I mean, for example, whether it be dive computers or handsets, like
oh
the,
yeah.
the bulky computers in 2006, I used tables still then,
Hmm.
and now we have dive computers, and they're getting every year they're getting smaller and smaller. And I remember the first time I looked at the Liberty when I was diving the side mount rebreather with you, and those handsets I just couldn't get over. Just it's like way too thin, and it's the more powerful and smaller, which is just fantastic. Not to have something big and bulky on your arm. Obviously, when you're doing side mount and you're getting to smaller nooks and crannies, be as streamlined as possible. That's definitely a plus. Less things to snag on, and that handset is just like crazy.
Yeah, I love it. And now we're kind of developing other like near eye optical displays. Like they're just like it's getting things are getting better, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's funny with the heads up display and stuff. I remember getting when I started diving 20 years ago and seeing Michael Meduno's his Aquacore. He had a lot of like sci-fi illustrations, kind of like the Borg type stuff, and
Uh-huh.
it seems like sometimes we're getting closer to that with the heads up displays, and but it's fantastic tools.
Yeah, it's like something out of Star Trek and whatnot. And so it's really cool. So
Yeah.
um yeah, and then like you also have your kind of back to the Florida shipwrecks, you have an encyclopedia. And I think you just have one volume of it.
Yeah, so originally I had planned on doing a 3-volume set and just kind of work around the coast. And I figured, by breaking
That's
into the Atlantic coast,
really
the
cool.
Florida
Yeah.
Keys, and the Gulf Coast, uh, that was my intention. I did that encyclopedia. It was good. The first volume was in 2010. And to be honest, maybe this is a bad side effect of technology,
Mm.
is the feedback on it. I got people. There's nowadays people saying, "Well, why do I need to buy a book? I can just find everything I want online on the internet."
No, I see. I still buy Britannica. I still buy all those things,
Exactly.
but I think I'm the only one.
I love hard real books. It's just something about that, but you can't ignore the fact that that's the way we're headed towards is paperless books, ebooks, and stuff, and so I just felt for all the effort that goes into researching it and putting it all together and printing it, and then trying to flog your wares and sell it. I just
Hmm.
kind of got disenfranchised and disenchanted with that whole process and said, I'm just going to go have fun for myself, and I'll do articles and do videos because it was just more fulfilling to get the instant gratification as well from not only yourself but from others to view your videos. So
Right, right.
yeah. I don't know if there'll ever be a volume 2 or volume 3. Definitely have the research there, but just haven't put it all together.
A lot of work. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The and kind of on the other side of the fence of kind of writing the books, the what is it? You're like I've talked about your YouTube videos a couple times on here, and I feel like you've been putting quite a lot of content on there in terms of the videos. We do these. Divesoft does these live streams. What's been kind of the feedback on basically showing these digital video or building these videos of a lot of your exploits?
That's a good question. One I don't know if I have a unbiased answer for. I mean, I think it's generally within the technical diving community. I mean, obviously the videos are being viewed, but in the scheme of other activities, it's laughable, right? When you get a video
Oh
that gets
yeah.
like 4 or 5,000 views, and then you see someone like post a skateboard video that gets 5,000 views in the first 10
I'm
minutes.
proud of the views you get compared to some.
Yeah, but I've tried to crack that code to figure out what is appealing to divers, because obviously there's millions of divers out there, but what resonates with them, and that's been a interesting dilemma to try to crack that code, and haven't gotten there yet, but I'm just trying to tell stories and get some pretty pictures out there and share with who I can. uh,
Right, right. I
yeah.
mean, combining the drone footage with music and whatnot, and like different angles and whatnot. You're not looking at divers' feet for an hour, and so it's
No,
it,
exactly.
it,
And it's I felt, obviously we've all seen a lot of bad dive videos out there, and a lesson I heard, Becky Kagan always talked about tell a story, right?
right. She does a
She
great
comes from
job of that.
yeah, she comes from a broadcast background. She knows how to do this properly. Whereas, I've been kind of learning as I go and self-teaching
Hmm.
myself. And yeah, it just no one wants to watch a cave diving video. All you're seeing is diver fins for the whole dive. And sometimes the cave is difficult to work with. You get different angles and different shots, and in without choreographing it ahead of time. A lot of times when you're
Right.
diving with friends, a lot of your friends, they want to go do their dive. They don't want to spend the whole time getting blinded by video lights, and because you want your one little shot. So, but I've gotten, a lot of the guys in KUR are very, uh, very very gracious with their time, and to basically pleasure my whims with getting the video and stuff, and to get to tell a good story. And so I've steadily tried to improve my craft, so to speak, and to get on the level of Becky is. When she's way up here out screen. I'm hopefully moving in that direction at least.
Yeah. I know I've been a big fan of a lot of your videos, and yeah, Becky and people like Alex Dawson, they have so much talent.
Yeah.
And so it's really like kind of combining a lot of different things and aspects of it. But when you're diving with the KUR guys, I mean, has any of the videos kind of helped with documenting and kind of been used more than like other than entertainment purposes?
No, definitely. I mean, I think that's part of our mission. Statement is to
Right.
document, and you want to disseminate to the public, right? You want to again share with people, not just divers, but to the general public, because you
Hmm.
want to educate them as well about this precious resource, our drinking water and the Florida aquifer. And so, a lot of times, we're working with permits with the state parks, or the Forest Service. And as an example, we went and did a special project up at Silver Glen Springs, up in north of Ocala in Florida. And
Right.
it's a really cool little side mount cave. I'd love to get back in there with the Liberty here in the near future, and with the new camera I've got. But that we did in one day. We banged out a little video. Adam Hughes was running the point on that project, and
Hmm.
we wanted to tell the whole story of what we're doing. Not just diving. But so I got
Right.
footage of him surveying. Taking survey measurements, and what role these springs play. And we pass that on to the Forest Service, and they kind of forward it on to their higher ups, and it really got a lot of positive feedback. So again, when you can show value to the people giving you the permits, that you're not just having fun doing a dive at a site that's closed to the general public,
Hmm.
whether it being trying to disseminate information to the public, education, I think it goes a long way. And I've kind of tried to forge that path. I mean, we obviously have people in KUR that are phenomenal. I mean, world-class explorers. They want to lay line. They want to survey, and that's great. And so I'm just trying to find my niche. And I think my role in the organization is to document and try to do videos and share that information as best I can to help the KUR objectives and mission.
Right. Right. I mean, and I think it's a fundamental point of it. It's especially in terms of people how manage land, and even in terms of like it's almost something that you would see at an aquarium. You would be like, okay, this is, you have, say, Clearwater Aquarium, Tampa Aquarium. It's like, oh, these are the things that are kind of in our area, and what people and organizations and groups have kind of discovered and recorded and documented. And that, I mean, all of that plays into like, factors for, I mean, the importance of collecting this footage. I imagine shipwrecks, even from a historical standpoint, and from, as significance as like fisheries and reefs and whatnot, have a role in that as well.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you've touched on so much. It's kind of hard to unpack that all, but you're exactly right. I
Right.
mean,
It's a big thing.
to document this, I mean, obviously with caves, it's for education, to show what's down there. It's not just wet rocks. I mean, I always use the parallel of people, millions of people every year go to the Grand Canyon to look at rocks,
Dry
uh,
rocks.
dry rocks, and that's what we're doing underwater. We're seeing the Grand Canyons underwater, and seeing clay banks that have taken eons to form. This is beautiful. I mean, I'm a wreck diver at heart, and I kind of only got into cave diving 25 years ago to do something in the wintertime when the weather was terrible. But I was amazed how quickly I really enjoyed cave diving. Just not only to keep my skill set sharp, but also just to explore and to document. And obviously with shipwrecks, it's a little bit different because it's not as those shipwreck sites are not as static as caves are.
Hmm.
These things are constantly changing, and we've seen documented the 20, 30 years I've been down here in Florida. where from one year to another, we're seeing dramatic changes, especially a lot of the World War II shipwrecks that are just starting to implode on themselves now, massive
Mm,
collapses. I know Pete Mesley's seeing that in Truck Lagoon. I mean, it's a little bit more stable, but and you can see those changes. And so you go out there and take pictures, and kind of what they're doing now with that baseline project, doing the photogrammetry, is another phenomenal tool.
yeah.
So you can see that you can capture it at a moment in time, and 5 or 10 years from now, you can see, what it looks like then. And obviously, fishery-related impacts, whether it be trawling or gill nets. I mean, that's obviously a
Right.
constant problem on shipwrecks, and that, I've always felt that that's far more perilous for shipwrecks, their stability than any diver, and it's one that's largely ignored by managers.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, the photogrammetry that even the models, the 3D models that I think Becky's husband made, Dave, of one shipwreck, and
Yeah,
it was really cool. And it's a model of it, and so it's really neat.
yeah, it's for obviously for when you have a big shipwreck or poor visibility, you only can see a portion at any given time. Whereas you spend enough time to capture all the imagery to make these models, you can see the whole thing from the comfort of your home and spin it around. And obviously it also helps with, planning your dives and where you want to go, the features
Oh
you want
yeah.
to go see, and what angles you want to shoot from. So it hits on so many different levels, not just documentation, but for as a planning tool.
Right. Right. It's so speaking of planning, I know you were talking about that you may your trip may work out this year, may not. Do you have any other projects that you're kind of currently working on that you can talk about, or anything upcoming?
Yeah, I think rolling out of last year, we were all kind of hoping this would be a banner year for
Yeah.
everything, and it's maybe not playing out that way. It's obviously it's a very fluid situation with international travel in general. But yeah, we had planned to do the Lusitania as well, a few weeks, basically a month earlier than the Britannic, and then roll into the
Hmm.
Britannic. We also there's a documentary coming out later this year on the History Channel on some dives we did last year, which was an epic saga all on its own.
Oh,
Because we dealt with when we are doing it. It was basically a project that I can't really speak too much about it in detail, but the broad strokes is something I've been wanting to do for years, if not decades. And all the cards, all the tools, all the parts came together
oh,
early
cool.
last year, and then COVID happened. And
Oh,
not only did COVID happen, but then also we had the most active hurricane season on record in Atlantic Basin the same year. I mean, it was just like everything's like Mother Nature and the world's like, no, you're not doing anything this year. And
here's your
with that being
sign.
said, yeah, we went out. We had planned a 5-day trip that we ended the weather just because then we actually literally had a hurricane in the Gulf. We had a hurricane a couple hundred miles to the east of us in the Atlantic, and we basically managed to get out for basically 27 hours. We had a small little weather window, and it was iffy at best. And that was more productive than a lot. It just so we did score a win, and that's going to be featured in this documentary that's coming out later this year. That I think a lot of people will find quite interesting. So I'd be happy to talk about it after it comes out. But yeah, that there might be some offshoots of that as well, some future work related to that. And then obviously I also have a lot of local stuff that I think I'm pivoting towards uh, this year because if I can't travel internationally, you
Right.
gotta,
Right.
obviously being in Florida, we have our backyard here, so there's nothing to scoff at, fortunately. And we're doing some things. We're actually gonna do a trip out to Louisiana to go wreck diving, which is not your typical wreck diving trip
No,
for
not at
many
all.
different
Not from
reasons.
Louisiana. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to mix it up a little bit and do some cool
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, that sounds like you're definitely keeping yourself very busy and a lot of projects. And when this documentary comes out, I know we're definitely going to want to watch it, and then maybe we can have you on. We can chat about it and whatnot.
Love to. And then if the bullshit gets too deep, I got my boots here
There you go. He's got the
to
Liberty
wear. So
Shallows.
yeah, you have to send all your viewers these boots so the bullshit gets higher.
That's fantastic. Yeah, they're good boots. I love mine.
Oh yeah.
So. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to everyone that watched, and thanks for joining us, Michael. And yeah, we'll be going diving soon.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, did you have any questions from anyone watching? Or I don't know. I haven't watched the comments come in yet.
Yeah, I think there's this
Doing
guy
good?
Bob that keeps commenting. I don't know who he is, but
No one likes Bob.
but yeah, it's well, if there's with some of the comments and whatnot, if you guys have any questions about any of kind of the shipwrecks, oh, Rebecca's asking about some planes. Like, have you ever found any planes underwater?
That's a great question. A nice segue to the project I was just talking about. Yes, I've had fair experience with aircraft wrecks. Typically, personally, I don't find aircraft wrecks to be that interesting from a dive perspective because a lot of times the circumstances of their loss is just scrap metal on the bottom. They fall apart very easily and just scrap
Yeah.
piece of metal. But they do tell stories, and we found some really phenomenal aircraft wrecks over the years. We're looking for more aircraft wrecks in particular, and so yeah, I think I definitely have in the past few years found quite a few aircraft wrecks, and we're working with the Navy to identify these. And I think in the past 2 years we found, I think probably been about 12 to 14 aircraft wrecks in the past
Wow.
year alone. And I think out of those 12 or 14, we've identified 10 of them. We've actually have the actual incident in the story of who the pilot was.
Wow.
And we've been working with the Navy to document all that. So, because it is, U.S. Navy property still.
Right, right. Wow, incredible. It's a lot of work too. So it's awesome stuff that you're doing.
It's a lot of fun. Keeps me out of trouble, more or less. I mean, I guess you should ask my wife that, but
Yeah. There
gets
you
me
go.
into trouble.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, and thanks again for everyone tuning in. So we'll see you guys next week on another episode of Divesoft TV. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Hey, Joe. Bye-bye.
See ya.